Welcome, everyone, to this week's Life Conversations with a Twist. I am really excited for this conversation. I always start my podcast out by saying how I met my guests. And actually, Allyn and I met on a podcasting group. She is also a
Yes.
podcaster. We're talking, we all like put on what our podcasts are about, and I instantly like connected with her because this conversation has come up multiple times in my life in the last couple months. And so I'm really excited to have you on and hear your story and promote your new podcast that just released last week.
Thank you so much. Yes, I know. I am excited and very happy to be here. And I think that it was a natural connection. And so I'm grateful to be here with you today having this conversation.
I love like our little podcast community. I think we're all, we all are in it and just trying to figure it out and support each other. And so I think a lot of my guests have come from that. So I just love being connected to everyone, especially all over the world. Where are you at? I forget to even ask you where you live.
Oh, funny. Yeah, I am in Oregon right
That's right.
now.
Okay.
So not too far from you, but yeah, it is you kind of forget in this online world and especially working online and digital and people are all over and it's nice to kind of have that sense of community, but then you also kind of lose that connection sometimes of where are you?
Where are
Stuff
you?
like that. So yeah, not too far from you.
So I'm going to tell everyone a little bit about your story, but I am going to have you to tell it. But the reason why I wanted to start with this is because I had mentioned that this conversation has come up a lot, and
Hmm.
you were recently with an ex who was a narcissist.
Hmm.
And just a little backstory. Locally here, we have this amazing women's group that does different types of group meetups, and one of them was around women who are either going through a divorce, who've been through a divorce, just like kind of bringing like this divorce topic kind of community together. And I was asked to go because I've been through a divorce. And so just being there to support and kind of like give them like, okay, show them the light. Like there is more on the other side once you can kind of get through it. And a lot of the stories talked about their husbands being a narcissist. And I was like, oh my God, this is like truly a thing. And then I have some close people in my life who are kind of going through it as well. And this is your topic. This is your experience. This is what you've, you know, or started your podcast around. So I think this is a much needed conversation to have. Tell us a little bit about kind of, I mean, there's so much to dive into, but a little bit about your backstory and kind of how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, I'm so excited to be here with you and talking about this. And it is something that, unfortunately is affecting a lot of us. And so I will say that, I think that the term narcissism is spread around a lot. It's a very hot topic and is talked about in a lot of different ways. And I'm sure that we'll get into that more. This is not something that I knew a ton about prior to this. And even in my relationship, I did not identify it. This is not something that I even identified until after the fact. And that also speaks to how good these people really are. Um, Prior to this, I want to say my life was normal. My life was great. Not perfect. No one's life is perfect, but I kind of the hallmark of my life is wrestling a lot with chronic illnesses, and so that has been my main challenge since a very, very young age. And that was sparked by a sexual assault when I was younger. And I did not come to realize that until I was in my late 20s doing some work with EMDR therapy, which if people are not familiar, that is some trauma-based therapy work involving eye movements and helping to kind of work through more traumatic memories and stuff like that. And so I'd come to my therapist with this memory and just wanted to do work around it. And I totally recalled this memory that was kind of a missing puzzle piece for me in a lot of ways. And we went from there. And so that really opened up a lot for me and and kind of helped in my journey of figuring things out. It's not a magic wand, but it made things make sense a little bit more. And so I think that's kind of kind of my story in a nutshell is wrestling with these issues, but always wanting to help people. And so I started chronic illness coaching about 4 years prior, and that was really going well, kind of coming on as a member of the care team and helping people throughout their journeys with that, navigating the trauma and kind of helping them reach their goals and living with these illnesses. And throughout this, I think dating has always been, a goal, also just a kind of an issue when you're not feeling well. It's not high on your list. And as I started to feel better, as I started to feel like more and more of the puzzle pieces fell together, I felt like I had more capacity for that. And that kind of led to me dating more over the past few years, but more seriously in the last year or two. And I met someone on an online dating app last year, and it was just quick, it was fast, and away we went. And that was this relationship, and it unfortunately ended not well, but that was kind of how we got there.
Um, it's so interesting with the dating app.
Yeah, I know, I
I
know.
dabbled in it like when I got divorced the first time, and I always say to people who I have friends who are still dating, and so I've had success stories. I've had friends who
Yeah.
husbands and like have great relationships and stuff, but like God, what a like scary place to be, and like not being able to like really like understand who somebody is, or there's so many lies and things behind their photos or their profile, and so it is a scary place. So
Yeah.
hopefully we don't like totally knock the dating world of like
No,
bad people,
no.
but it is
Yeah.
harder to, I feel like it's easier for people online to kind of like hide their identity.
Oh, I mean, you can be whatever you want to be and whoever you want to be. And I think that that's, and take that with anything. I mean, with social media or with whatever, and with starting a business, and it's kind of like have your confidence and step into this new persona and whatever. And I think in a lot of ways it can be a good thing. And with dating, it can be somewhat dangerous, and you just need to be smart and you need to weed through it. And I felt like I was doing that. And I met a lot of great people. There are a lot of guys that I'm still in contact with, and they've become great friends. And and I've had some really great experiences and great memories and stuff. And so it's not to dissuade you. And I actually, you and I bonded too. I used to be an event planner years and years ago before this, and this is how I kind of warmed up to this, is because I had a lot of couples who were meeting through this and finding their person. I was like, okay, so it can't be all, all kind of crap. And so there are good things that come from it. This just unfortunately was not. And that just also speaks to, him and the personality and stuff like that. So I don't know the exact numbers, the percentages on how many are not good or really not good. But yeah, they're not all bad. They're
They're
not
not
all
all
bad.
bad.
No.
Okay, so you meet this gentleman, not so gentleman. Maybe you thought he
Yeah.
was a gentleman. Talk about like your experience in meeting him and kind of like where your relationship kind of developed.
Yeah. So we met again, the apps. I don't understand. I say this in my show as well, is that I initially swiped no. And then he came back up the next day. And I don't my understanding of the apps is that shouldn't happen, but it did. And he came back up. We matched, and it was just kind of what I call a lightning bolt of energy and of a match. And um he was kind of all the things I hadn't necessarily found before, in terms of, when you're on the apps, it feels like people are flaky or very surface level or hypersexualized, and or they're not intentional and all these things. And I felt like I was getting the complete opposite with that. And And my goal all along was it sounds funny to say, but ideally I would have wanted to meet my person and my partner on the apps. That was my goal. I wasn't just dating to date or to talk to people. And he fell in line with that, and we both had similar goals, and it was easy, and it felt like this was my person, and we talked a lot. We had a lot of open, honest conversation. It had a lot of ease to it. It had a lot of fun to it. He was very charming, charismatic. He reciprocated, which I appreciated. I felt like a lot of times it was just me asking guys questions or, I was
They're
like,
not
this
engaged.
this gets old. Yeah, this
Yeah.
is not fun. And and so it was fun, and it was, it kept me interested, and I thought he was respectful and all the things. And we were in different states at the time. I was leaving where he was located. I had been visiting for about a month, and so I was coming back home for a wedding, and we were in separate places. So it was long distance, and we talked, and he said, "Would you want to come out here for the 4th of July?" And I said, "Sure." And we had a conversation, and I said, is there anything I need to be worried about? Anything I need to be concerned about? And we had it. I felt like he answered really quickly, and he said, "Nope. I had this one thing in my past, but it wasn't anything, extremely serious." And we talked about it, and I felt like he was open and honest, and I valued that. And he always kind of gave me a little bit more than what I asked for, which I valued. And we went from there, and very quickly we were together on that trip. He said, "Oh, you're my girlfriend." And I didn't really love that it was told to me and not asked. And we had that conversation, but I also love that it wasn't a game that we were playing for however long, the back and forth, and I'm not going to commit and stuff like that. And so we were together, and in a way we went, and very quickly I was integrated with his family. I think a few weeks later I was on a big family trip. A few weeks after that he came out to
With
meet
his
my.
family.
Oh, yeah.
Did you, so because you guys didn't live in the same state and you guys
Mm-mm.
met up, did you guys like move in together or you just like traveled a lot to see each other?
We traveled a ton. So that first time we were together, and he said, we were on some family property of his, and he said, "This is such a big deal that we're here, that my parents are allowing us to be here." And I had said, "Well, what did you tell them?" And he said, "I told them that you're my girlfriend." And I said, "Well, that's the first time I'm hearing that." And, we kind of talked about that. And I said, "Well, I have things that if that's what we're doing, that I want and need to happen." Like, in terms of how often we see each other. At that point in time, I was in Oregon, he was in Montana, and what that looked like. And we kind of agreed on every few weeks we would try to make an effort. And so that worked out well for us. And so I mean, honestly, by the time I got home from that trip, he had already invited me to come out. It was less than a week later, I think, for a big family trip. They were going out of town, and I felt like it was fast, but also at the same time, it was, when you're adults, everyone lives in different states, everyone's all over, and it was going to be mom and dad and siblings and aunts and uncles and cousins. And so it was everyone, and family's a big value to me. I believed it was a big value to him. And so I was kind of like, this is also one of my only chances aside from holidays to meet everyone. And I just said yes and went, and it was something that I was excited to do. They were doing some really fun stuff on that trip. And so yeah, it moved very, very fast. But I also felt like, well, I'm going to learn a lot about him. It's either going to be, good or bad, very
Yeah,
fast.
especially when you're with their family, right? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I was
How
like,
were
I
you
guess.
feeling like with the relationship at the time? Like, were you like, oh my God, this is so fast? Or like, oh my God, I love him too. Like, I'm feeling, like did you feel like you were on the same page or were you a little like hesitant because it was moving so fast?
I was totally in love, for sure. I felt like, yeah, I can feel that this is moving fast, but I also felt like, who am I to say what the timeline is for anyone? In my mind, I always had, the timeline of a relationship, and it was very drawn out, a lot longer than that, and what it would look like. And it did not look like this. But I also felt like my life in a lot of ways has felt unconventional. And I think that is a nod to the chronic illness stuff. And I also kind of have this weird relationship with time that I talk about a lot, where I value it and I don't want to waste it. And that can be good or bad. And I don't think it was necessarily bad, but I just feel like I trusted him, and we can look back and say I shouldn't, but I trusted him, I trusted myself with it, and I felt like I don't want to waste time, and I want to learn things. And if I'm going to learn it, I'd rather learn it now than in a year or whatever. And in retrospect, I'm still glad that that happened, because I got out of it quicker than being in it for, years and years
Because you
longer
guys weren't
than.
like when you guys split up, you weren't married and you
No,
didn't have children, thankfully.
correct. Yeah, which we were planning on both. And so, yes. So luckily, no, I got out of it a lot better than I would have, should have, or could have, I guess,
Yeah.
and then a lot of other women do. And so I'm very fortunate in that sense, that as much as it was terrible, there were a lot of other things that could have happened with that. So, yeah.
So you're going on all these family trips, you're meeting his family, everything is great. Like where did like things start to kind of switch and you noticed something was a little bit off?
There were things. That's a great question. Like, where do I begin with that one? There were things. I think the main thing, and it's hard now because I can look back and there were a lot of things that I didn't identify then that I can now go back and identify as abuse or manipulation, that I did not see at all then. I just knew that it didn't feel great, and I didn't really love the behavior, or it felt kind of sticky, or like it was going against my values or beliefs. But we were in love and it was discussed, and then we kind of moved past it. And so one of those, or it's kind of examples of those, would be there was definitely some sexual coercion or boundaries that were crossed time and time again. Um, but in hindsight, or as it was happening, I felt like this was a new relationship. I brought it up to him, it would be addressed, and then it wouldn't happen for a few times, and then it would happen again later, or it happened to a greater degree, and something like that. And so again, I didn't fully recognize those things, and I didn't have any real understanding about what that looked like in terms of being in a committed relationship, and stuff like that. And so
I'm
I
assuming you're
didn't.
talking about like him wanting to do things that you didn't feel comfortable doing
Correct.
or stuff that you're like, this isn't like my jam, but it's like it's hard because you're like, okay, I want to like
Yeah.
maybe experience it and see, but like at the same time, you're like, I don't feel comfortable with this. And he kept pushing it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes, that will definitely be in episode 2. Episode 2 is a bit of a doozy, coming out this week in particular.
I love how you
But
like on because I mean you just have your first one out, but I was like you left it like hanging. I was like, dang it, now I gotta listen next week. And I love that.
yeah. Yes. Yes, yes, yes.
But don't spoil it
There's a
all
lot.
mine. You don't have to go into detail.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah. So that was one example. And then I think the other thing that was perpetually an issue for us is that he had some issues with his ex that became more and more of an issue. Um, Initially, and I say this in my show, obviously, when we matched and when we started talking, and when I went on the family trip and everything, he was 100% single. That relationship was in the past. That wasn't even a factor. We never talked about it. And then on that family trip, it was brought up. And ever since then, it was brought up more and more. And she became more and more involved in our lives. And it became very apparent that she was not fully gone. And all the way to the very end, when it became apparent that she had been around the whole time.
Oh.
Um, and so that was a rub, though. I obviously didn't know that. He kind of duped all of us with that. And so that was an issue, though, that we went back and forth on, and, trusting your partner. And I never had a reason not to trust him. And I think also his family, he was telling his family the same thing. He was telling my family the same thing. And I think trust was a big topic of this experience, and trusting your partner, but also trusting yourself, and it got very blurry and hard. But there were a lot of instances that just became very difficult to kind of navigate. And so there were little things throughout, but as a whole, I felt like I was very in love, and this was my person. There were hard things, but I was going to figure it out and move through it. And we made a commitment to each other, and that just didn't end up happening.
Did you guys ever did you end up moving in together?
We were supposed to. I had a move date of end of October, and I had moving supplies being delivered to me the weekend that we broke up. So very close, but no, we did not.
Um, so he had another person. Did he
Mhm.
have like a whole nother life? Like, did he have like children? Did he have like a
No.
whole nother was he totally living like crazy, crazy life, or was he just like not telling you the full truth about maybe some things that were like hanging in the hanging in the
Yeah.
wind?
Yeah, no, definitely different lives. He wears many masks. Um, no children that I am aware of. I don't believe he has any children, which is a blessing for everyone. Um, he was with me, so that's one. And then he was also with the other woman, so that's two. And he was had engagements with both of us, plans to move into new houses with both of us, plans to have children with both of us, all the same things. He told us all the same things. And at the same time, he was having whatever you want to call them, extra relations with dozens and dozens of other women. Um, so really, just I don't even know how many lives we want to call that. Um, but he just presented in very different ways, a lot of different times. So he was living his one life with me, and my family knew about it. His family knew about it. We were all excited for this life. And then when I wasn't there, he would be at home with his other girlfriend and his family. And I thought she was gone, and
Oh,
that was
even
not a
I was gonna
factor.
say, like, what did his family think about? They just thought it was you.
Mhm.
They didn't know about anything else.
They knew about her from the past, and were not
Mhm.
fond of her, but thought that she was not a factor anymore.
Yeah.
So they were just as surprised as I was. And then a whole other category of kind of the, behind closed doors, what he's doing on his phone with continuing on apps, and all of that stuff. And so there was a lot going on there.
Jeez. So at what point was it like, when did you discover this, or how did you discover this?
Oh, well, I had no idea.
Until after you guys broke up?
Yeah.
Oh.
And I like to think I'm intelligent. I feel like I'm intelligent. I have been cheated on before, and so I'm very sensitive to that. We talked a lot about cheating. When we very first met, a lot of my questions were about all of that stuff. And I think that's kind of even par for the course now is people, it's a digital age. You look people up. I looked him up. And he had not much going on social media wise, and I liked that. I was like, oh, this is nice. Like, I enjoy that. And we talked about Snapchat. He said, I don't have a Snapchat. And I said, great. And so there wasn't a lot going on, and we talked about all of that. And when we became official, we both were like, we're deleting the dating apps. And so, that was kind of the conversations. And then I was out there house sitting. I was making dinner. He was supposed to be coming over, and he texted me one night and said, the first night I was there, and he said, um, this has all been moving really fast. I think I need some time to be by myself and figure things out. And I just dropped to the floor, and I just knew. I was like, it had just all been kind of odd, and I just knew. And he was gone. We had each other's locations. His location was gone. I just knew that it was just not right. And I was talking to his sister. We were super close, and she said there's no way he would do this. And I said, your brother just broke up with me. She said, there's absolutely no way. Like, he's so in love with you. And I called him, and he didn't answer. And I texted him, and I said, I'm sorry, I don't understand. Is this a breakup? And he said, I think that's for the best right now. And I just, I went into a complete just shock. And everyone was kind of trying to figure out what was happening. His sister was really rallying behind me. I just couldn't even function. Um, the next day, I ended up getting a Facebook message request, and then it was deleted, but it was from the woman who I knew was his ex. I knew her name. I had never talked to her. And I just sent back a question mark because I was just so I was like, everyone's saying so many different things. I'm so tired of hearing all these different things. And I sent that back, and she replied right away, and she said, hi, Allyn. I'm his girlfriend of however long, and um I found your letter in his truck, and he told me he broke up with you for me, and he's been cheating on both of us with all these other women. And she just sent me all these screenshots. And you can't, as much as you don't want to believe it, I kind of felt that. And also all of the screenshots of everything. I mean, it's not just her, um, but it's other women, and they're on time stamped of weekends when, like, maybe I wouldn't hear from him as much, or when, they filled in the gaps. And so she said, he's right here if you want to talk to him. And I hadn't talked to him, and I called, and they were at home together, and she put the phone up to him, and he got really volatile. And she said, yep, that's how he talks to me. And I couldn't even form words. I was just uh, sobbing and beside myself. And I said, I'm so sorry. I said, I had no idea that you guys were together. I'm so sorry that I did, like, I switched into being the other woman. I felt so bad. And she goes, yeah, he's been doing this to both of us. There's all these other women. And she had been on a Facebook group, and just kind of collecting information for a while about him. And he was all over, he traveled for work. He was all over the state and surrounding states,
Doing his thing.
being with other women, I guess, while he was gone. And I went on and got on the group, and you can't deny, I mean, it's all over. He was all over. And that's how I found, and she and I talked at length for a little bit, and our stories were just complete puzzle pieces to each other. She'd be like, were you together this time? And I'd say, yeah. And I was like, did you, da da da? And we matched up. And, I guess it provided a little bit of comfort to both of us in that sense. And that's kind of how I guess I found out. But I didn't know. And I was always kind of that girlfriend that if I had an issue, I'd bring it up to him, but I was never can I see your phone? Can I go through your phone? I always just trusted him in that sense. And apparently that was wrong. Apparently I should have been doing phone checks on the guy, but I don't want to be in a relationship where I have to do phone checks on you,
Yeah.
and here's how it turned out, I guess.
Is she still with him?
I believe so.
Oh my gosh.
I believe so.
So how long were you guys together? Like your whole span of relationship?
Not long. It was June to October. So yeah, not
So yeah,
long.
you fell fast. Besides like the
Mhm.
sexual like weirdness
Yeah.
that happened, was there any other things that he did that made you kind of like red flag or make you feel uncomfortable or
Yeah, I think, it's hard because it's the person that you love, and I say this in my show time and time again, that his superpower is walking the line extremely close. And so, I think a lot of women can relate to the fact that you know, we're strong, and we always say, if it ever teetered over, if it's like what it looks like on TV or something, then I'd be gone in a heartbeat. And I felt that to my core, and it that was my story, is that it never looked like that. It never looked like an episode of SVU or like the movies or anything, but he was very good at being very coercive in subtle ways and whittling me down over time in a lot of ways that I did not understand, and like slowly devaluing me. And that's really what we see kind of in the psychological abuse pattern, is these acts of abuse or causing pain or inflicting confusion and stuff, and then you come back around and you provide love or affection or compliments or something like that. And that really was, we were stuck in this cycle, and that started super early with, I was love bombed really fast, and then we're together and it's great, and then very early on in our intimate relationship, these things started happening that I wasn't comfortable with, that escalated into biting during sex, that escalated into biting when we were not having sex. Um, so now we have bruising. We have we're having these conversations that we shouldn't be having. That's not love for your partner. You're hurting your partner. But it wasn't every time. And then these things would be addressed, and then they'd happen again. And also it just changed. I mean, the devaluing of even communication and talking, and then not talking, it would go silent, and it would go to like, I love you, you're my soulmate, I can't wait to be a parent with you, and all these things. And it was just this cycle, and that really is tough because you don't see it in the moment. And I was just like, I love him and I just want us to be good. And what you see in people like him is that they're very conscientious about who they pick. And so I'm not a fighter. I'm not argumentative by nature. I have a tendency of being a people pleaser, which I am working on, but I a lot of times I want to like move past it. I don't want to go toe to toe. I'll bring something up, and I would bring things up time and time again, but it was like in a, hey, can we work on this? Not like a, I want to go toe to toe with you.
mm-hmm.
And that really worked, I believe, to his advantage, and he knew that, because I was never going to outright fight him on things
Mm-hmm.
and escalate things, and get, we weren't going to have a blowout argument. And so looking back on our relationship, we had one, I don't even want to say argument, it was just I got up and ended up walking away, but we never had fights. We never really raised our voices at each other. It was all pretty calm, but there are just like these acts that happen over time to where you suddenly aren't yourself. I wasn't dressing the same. He would make comments about what I was wearing, and I don't really like that. Why don't you wear something different? And slowly over time, you just change who you are. And
Mm-hmm. Talk to us a little bit about some of the characteristics. Obviously, you have a little bit, but if somebody isn't familiar with this type of behavior, some of the characteristics that you've witnessed or ones that you've heard, like obviously now that you've opened this like Pandora box, like I'm sure you've been hearing all kinds of crazy stories. But
Mhm.
talk through some of the behaviors or things that somebody might who might be in a relationship like this not know, um, that they could kind of like, maybe that's me.
Yeah, yeah. So uh there's a lot of interesting stuff on here. I will refer people to Dr. Nadine Macaluso. She's a guest expert on my show. She was married to the Wolf of Wall Street, and she was played by Margot Robbie in that film with Leonardo DiCaprio, and she is now an expert on trauma bonds and helping women overcome these things, and she came on my show and is super helpful. But her website has a lot of awesome quizzes and just great things. But one thing that she has on there that has been really helpful for me is she talks about the dark tetrad or triad. And so kind of starting there before you even get into narcissism. So it refers to kind of how you look at personality traits. Um, and it's a spectrum. All these things are kind of a spectrum. So the first would be narcissism, and we'll get into that one. The second would be, I always have to like practice on saying this, Machiavellism. And so, yeah, I know, sounds very fancy.
Yeah.
Um, and third would be psychopathy, and then the fourth that they just have in there is sadism. And so that really is obviously the extreme. That would be deriving pleasure from inflicting pain or suffering on others. But going into narcissism, um, it really is kind of an entitlement or dominance over people, and a lack of empathy, a lack of remorse. And there's different versions of it. And so it's grandiose or covert, and there's all different ways to get into it. But you will tend to see the kind of inflated sense of their own importance. They believe that they tend to be kind of more superior than others. I know with my ex, he definitely said that, or he called people losers all the time, which drove me insane. It was kind of done in like a loser, like, and it's not like you're saying a bad word or cussing someone out, but I was like, "Huh, like you can't say that. Like that's not nice." So it's kind of this like,
Like also what makes you think that you're better than them?
yeah, what do you, but like he's like loser. And I'm like, so it's and I say that because you think it's like these big things, but it's these little things. And you look back and you're like, oh my gosh. And it's these things that actually add up over time. So we have that. We kind of have the lack of empathy. So they might kind of identify your feelings or something, but they really struggle to maybe recognize or even care about them. They tend to have a need for admiration. They crave excessive attention from others to reinforce their self-image. I saw that a lot. We ended up going to one of his friends' weddings, and that was kind of a very interesting experience where it was kind of flipped, and it was like about him, and he felt like his friend wasn't there for him, and like he was sad he wasn't in the wedding, and like these people suck, and it was like this whole sob story. And so that's kind of needing that attention. um their sense of entitlement, they have manipulative behavior. Um, and again, that can look very, very subtle. The gaslighting, the lying, guilt tripping to control others or their self-image. So that's super important to note, that it's never just outright forceful, manipulation. But if it makes you question it, then a lot of times that probably is leading into one of those avenues. Um, Exploitation of others, preoccupation of fantasies. And so really they won't ever say it, but they kind of live in a
Mhm.
fantasy world about, power or brilliance or ideas or love, and always kind of talked about, houses or what we're buying or these things that kind of lends itself to the future faking that they can become involved in, and talking about future things to kind of keep you engaged or thinking about something that's not the present.
Mm-hmm.
But kind of always in this kind of fantasy world and drumming that up for you. Um, that arrogance and superiority that we talked about. They do have a fragile self-esteem, which is interesting because they don't show it, but narcissism is actually very shame based.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're actually deriving all of this from like an outward confidence. And so they have a very fragile self-esteem. And they're not going to outright say that, but you might over time, I think if you've been with someone for a long time, you might notice that. Um, and so those are kind of the main things that I would say to look for. I think there's a lot that goes into all of those, and it looks different for people, and there's a huge spectrum of things, but that those tend to be kind of the main things in terms of narcissism. And then as that kind of escalates into the dark triad, then you get into more and more um characteristics that don't, if you're not having remorse for what you're doing and stuff like that, then you escalate into other personality disorders. But really it's kind of that lack of empathy in what they're doing, and how they interact with their loved ones. I use that loosely, but in the people around them.
I know of some of these just off the top of people that I'm like,
Hmm.
oh, well, that makes sense. That's what
Yeah.
they are. Yeah. Um, After you had that conversation with X, he's with
Hmm.
her. That was your last interaction with him. Or did you ever see him after again? Or did he ever like beg you to stay with him? Like what was that transition like?
I he called me that night because I had been talking to his other partner. I don't even know how to phrase that. I don't know how they I don't know
Yeah.
how they
You don't know
categorize
what their
someone.
title was?
I don't know what it was. I don't know what it is. I don't know how to be correct on that. And so I was talking to her, and he called me and he said, I'd like to see you face to face. And it was the first time I had heard from him since he broke up with me the day before. And I said, I don't know what you could possibly want to talk about. At that point, it was like nail in the coffin for me. And I don't, there's no walking back from those things. And he just said, I'd like to see you. And I know that his family had been urging him to kind of see me face to face, and they didn't know about all this at the time. And so I said, fine. And so I saw him face to face. He came over, and he couldn't look me in the eye. We sat down, and I said, is this true that you were cheating on me with her? And he said, yes. And I said, okay. And you were cheating on both of us with other women? And he said, yes. And I said, okay. I said, and he got up and he was doing like his alligator tears. He goes to get a tissue, and he said, you didn't deserve this. And I said, I know I didn't deserve this. I said, you've destroyed two families, and I don't even know what the other damage is with the other women, but you've wrecked my family and yours. Because at that point, I was having to deal with my family, but then also I had a good relationship with his family. And so telling his parents and everything what was going on. Um, and he said, I know. He said, I know. And I said, okay. So I don't know what else there is to talk about. And he got up and left. And that was the last time I ever saw him. He texted me the next morning, and he said, I'm so sorry that you were brought into this, and it really hurts me that you're choosing to believe all these things about me, but I also understand because I lied to you. And he said, I have a lot of love for you. I love you so much, but it's hurting that you are choosing to believe these things. And I just said, at that you read it and you're like, what are you supposed to say to
That's why I'm
that?
like, at some point I could see that he's like, oh, can you take me back? Like, I'm so sorry. And it's like that, like circle again of it's gonna be
I
okay, and I'm sorry, and
Yeah. At that point, I just and I think the struggle with this and something that I've had a really hard time with is that I would love nothing more than to just rip him to shreds. But I realized from that very first time that weekend that he is sick, and on top of some other issues he has going on then with the personality disorders that I believe he has, there's no fixing it, and there's no I can't fix it. Me saying things is not doing anything. Um and so there's no point. And
Mhm.
so I just I said, you took my trust, you took my love, you took my plans and excitement for a future, and you took us planning children. We had names for our children, and you knowingly wrecked it all. And at what cost? And I said, I would love to say a lot of things right now, but I'm not going to say it because it doesn't matter and you're not worth it. And I said, I pray that you will get help, and I don't want anything else to do with you. And that was the last time I heard from him. I reached out a few times trying to get some things back from him, but I never heard back. And yeah, we haven't had any contact, which
So
is good.
obviously, like that was, a lot for you to come off of, right? Like any breakup is hard.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming that this process of getting over him and moving on from that was not easy, and it's probably still not even complete. But at
Hmm.
what point during your like grieving and experiencing this that you're like, you know what? Like I need to take what I like my experience and like inspire others who might be going through
Mm.
it with the podcast and things like that and leaning into it. Like what did that where did that trigger for you?
Yeah, I knew super early, um, very, very early, that I wanted to do something. I had no capacity to, though.
Yeah.
No capacity. I came home, and it was a blessing that I made it home. That I made it on my flights and got home, and that I was just a living, breathing human was a gift, because that was a struggle for me. And we had a lot of other stuff going on. We had a few family losses within those few months, and there was a lot going on personally as well. And so I guess even more personally, I don't know how much more personal you can get, but we had a lot going on in our family. And so I knew I wanted to do something I had no capacity to, because I couldn't even get through. Me getting through a day was a challenge. And my mental health was just extremely bad. And I you come out of something like this, and it's a breakup, but it's more than a breakup, because it's complete and utter betrayal of everything. And I had this future planned, and not only do I not trust others, but I don't trust myself. And it just shattered my whole idea of life in a lot of ways. And that sounds so dramatic, but I know if you've been through it, you'll understand.
Mhm.
And uh, I wanted to help people. I knew that I wasn't alone. I also think I saw the ripple effect of how many other women he had affected, and I was like, I know I'm not alone. But I there's so many things that run through your mind of how can I do this? How can I talk about this? And I sat on it for a long time. I had to get myself right. And someone she's on my show, Dr. Chris, she helped me a lot. She assisted me with ketamine therapy, but she told me one time, she just said, whatever you want to do, just do it clean. And that impacted me a lot and has always stuck with me. And what she meant by that was just whatever you want to do, go and do it, but do it not from a place of anger or
Mm,
being malicious. You do it from your own power and wanting to, help people. Do it from like a clean spirit is basically that. And I don't think I ever had a malicious intent. I think I had a really sad intent, and I think that this might have been a lot different if I did it earlier. I don't even think I would have been able to get through it, honestly, but yeah, I had to sit and wait, and it took a long time to even figure out what it would be and what it would look like and stuff. So you have to kind of give it that time. And even people have said, "Oh, it's really fast," and everyone's going to have their opinions of fast or slow or whatever. Um, and for a while, I was like, maybe I just do a really quick TikTok series. And, there's all these different things that you see people do or other people. And I just had to stick with what felt right and best for me. And it has turned out to be this.
I love it.
Thank
Um,
you.
I think it's great. And I think, again, like I've told you, like so many things have sparked from it. And I think even just having the conversation around it and like holding space for it
Yeah.
gives women an opportunity to, you know, support each other and help each
Mhm.
other and get through that together. Um, I know your breakup was like it was, I don't want to say easy, but like he was like, okay, it's done and it's done.
Yeah.
But do you have any advice to a woman who feels really stuck? Like if she tries to leave, it's going to be this emotional, you can't live without me. And all the things that they are that
Mhm.
will hinder them from leaving. Is there any advice or anything that you've learned that you could report out to these women?
Yeah. Yeah. I think that in a lot of ways I was fortunate, I guess, with that. I think I get that comment from people sometimes, and they say, "Oh, you're lucky that it was just over," and that's something that I have wrestled with a lot. And I will say that there's no good way to end something that you thought would be forever. And yes, that's great that it didn't go on and drag out, but at the same time, I spent a lot of time in such a warped way because you're breaking an addiction to this person. And I spent a lot of time crying over the fact, feeling like I know this is good, but at the same time feeling like he didn't choose me. And well, I didn't even want him to choose me, but he didn't even choose me. And I wrestled with that so much, and I had to pray on that for a long time. And I feel like when he didn't choose me, God chose me. And that's my personal belief. And I feel like I was chosen, and that's how I'm really trying to use this story. But there's a lot of ways to look at it, and that's kind of how I've looked at mine. But I just, if you're in it for a long time or it's dragging out, I just know that there's a different story being written for you. And it's on the other side of really brave and tough decisions. And I know it sounds extremely, extremely cliche, and I hate myself for saying it, but nothing is going to change unless you make a change, and they will not do it. And it has to come from you. And you can look at my story and say, oh, well, he made the change. And I will say that he did it because he was forced into it, because she found a letter of mine and had him do it.
Mhm.
And he wouldn't have done it on his own.
Right.
And so, don't look at my story and think different. They keep their supply, and it feeds ego, and it feeds all these things, entitlement and fantasies and superiority and self-esteem and all these things. And so they want to keep you around as long as possible, even if it is rocky or whatever. And so they think very differently than we think. And so it's not going to change until you make a change. And even once you make a change, it's not going to feel good. There's no way in any world that it feels good. But really looking at what you want your life to be, and if you have kids, what you want their lives to be. And for me, I don't have kids right now. That's a goal of mine, but for me, it's my nieces, and they've always been my why, and they were with me enough through this, and there were some times that they saw me upset or crying over things that happened, and even just that little tiny bit of them saying, "Why are you upset?" or, whatever, and that's too much, and that's not they shouldn't see that, is my belief, and, I believe in ending the cycle for them, but it takes a change of behavior or else it will keep going and running through generations. And so I believe that you have the strength. I believe that you have the courage to be the one to step up and change that. And I know how hard it is, but taking any form of action to do that and knowing that you are supported in that, and I've learned that throughout my story too, is that there are far more resources than you even think or know. I wasn't even aware of these things, but just even in your circle or community, and there are so many people willing and able to help you through this. And so I think just really kind of becoming attuned to that, but kind of looking big picture more than anything, and deciding to make that change and sticking with it. And you just have to know without a doubt that it will be hard and that you will try to be sucked in, and all of that, and I forget off the top of my head the statistics on how many times it takes to officially leave, but it's not 1, it's not 2, it's not 3, I know it's more than that, but it's a lot, and so know those things, be prepared, and have your why. You have to have a why, you have to know why you're doing it, and just stick with that and follow that.
I love that. It's such a great message. I think it's a great message in general for anything you want to do. I truly
Yeah.
I believe in that as well. But I think that's a great perspective that somebody should take. And whether they're leaving, whoever they're leaving.
I know, I
Um,
know.
but yeah, I just have like so many like as you're describing them, all these people like bing bing. Oh, that makes sense. Bing bing.
I know. I know. It's totally a hot word in the last few years. And so I think that's been something as you know, I try to not use it too much, and also I can't diagnose him or anyone. I'm not a therapist. Even I've talked to my therapist at length. I said, if I brought him in here, could you diagnose him? And she said, a lot of times they're so good that in therapy you can't. So even going to therapy with your partner who you feel like may have these issues is not encouraged, because it could lead to further issues or gaslighting or manipulation and stuff like that. Um, and so it's really fascinating, what that looks like, and it is hard to get a formal, diagnosis or whatever, and it's not like they're wanting to get that diagnosis for themselves or anything. But it's just something to be aware of, and I think even if you're feeling that, you can go when you want to go, and you deserve something that's more than that, and you're worth more than that. So yeah, I was in a relationship. I never identified the term. I never identified that. Afterwards, I was like, oh my gosh, yeah, it makes so much sense. And now I speak to that because it makes sense and people identify with it. And I do believe that's truth in my story, but it's also just a toxic relationship. And I think a lot of people, go through that as well. And we can all relate to something bad with that too.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for what you're
Yeah.
doing and
Yeah. Thank
like
you.
being strong and brave to even like talk
Thank
about
you.
it and then now it's even like taking an extra step to support people. And so I love what you're
Thank
doing.
you.
I'm your cheerleader. I will definitely
Thank
put
you.
all your stuff in the show notes for everyone to follow you. I can't wait for when is your episodes released? Tuesdays?
They're every Tuesday. Yep. Yep.
Okay.
Every Tuesday.
I'll be listening tomorrow. So like
Thank you.
want to know your the way you
Gosh.
tell the story is really cool. So
Thank you. Thank you. We're figuring it out as we go, but it's been good. It's been a good project. So I appreciate the feedback. Thank you.
absolutely. Yeah, thank you for being here and I'm so glad we connected.
Thank you. You too. I appreciate it.
Awesome.